Star Trek Enterprise. Welcome back from lunch, everybody. Hopefully our tech difficulties are a thing of the past. Really excited for the second half of the summit. And this morning was an amazing experience, really building this new hand worker economy, grounded in empathy, which Verna talked about, focusing on innovation that's really practical, which we also talked about with regard to wastewater, which is a massive problem in the space. And then we talked about storytelling, information, media, and the role that that has to play. And the next value is value. You know, how are we valuing artisans? And so really excited for this next session. So in Paris and Milan, craftsmanship is often touted really as the height of true luxury, with many famed houses taking incredible steps to continue the next generation of artisans to develop skills that are really considered important trade secrets. So how is craftsmanship in developing economies valued in comparison? And how can we expand this concept of handmade's inherent value to support masterwork all across the world? As consumer appetite for authenticity and originality grows, is there an opportunity to recast the term artisan in a more appealing and elevated light? So joining us today are pioneers of a new luxury. Our moderator, Stephen Kolb, is President and Chief Executive Officer of the Council of Fashion Designers of America, CFDA. And he's going to be in conversation with Barak Chukmuk, who is the Dean of Fashion at Parsons School of Design, and also joined by Simone Cipriani, who's head and founder of the International Trade Center's Ethical Fashion Initiative. And they're going to give shape to what will define value in the future. So welcome and thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for, hello, everybody. Wanted to thank Ness for inviting me and CFDA to participate in today's workshop. And I'm excited to be here with Simone and Barak and moderate this panel discussion. So we'll start with Simone. At Ethical Fashion Initiative, you have a powerful mantra, not charity, just work. In considering handcrafted products produced in developing economies, there is a danger in marketing these products as pity product, encouraging consumers to purchase out of charitable inclination as opposed to desire for the item. What are the problems, negative stereotypes associated with this type of marketing, and does it undermine the value of artisan craftsmanship from these places?
Yeah, truly, I am not what they told you I am, but I am the one of the restaurant, Cipriani. And I'm here, but no, I'm kidding. I'm not one of them. So, yeah, we started with this, not charity just, but to work, because our problem was, as you rightly say, that we were working in Africa. We started in Africa, and we were misunderstood as a charity project instead of a business that wanted artisans to be part of the supply chains. And it was a powerful mantra, you are right, but the main problem we met after having told everybody that we were business, that we were work and not charity, the main problem we met was the business model of the industry of fashion. Because in this business model, let's tell the truth, the place for the artisans is very reduced. You have a huge amount of the cost of the product, the majority of it goes to design, marketing, and all that. That area there, after the pure cost of goods sold, is huge. Then the cost of goods sold is going to shrink like this. Brrr. Inside this, nevertheless, there is something which is growing, which is the cost of raw materials, because brands now need super sleek and good raw materials, and you have technology, and you have all the rest. So much so that raw materials become scarcely available for an independent brand. They are in the hands of some networks of big players. So now, in this scenario, the quota, the percentage of the cost of a product that goes to work is becoming very small. And the industry, the business model, did something to make it possible. They standardized the work. Standardized the work in order to have the most common skills available in a standardized way and in a cheap way. Then the top skills for small productions are available, are there, but they are small numbers, small quantities. The big quantities are standardized, so much so that this industry has adopted a transactional mode of operation with artisans. You do me this work, I pay you this. If you don't, I go somewhere else. That's standardization of that. It's not a relationship mode. Let's build value together. Let's develop this together. Let's build value together. Let's do something for the brand. In this scenario, we found the business model the real problem. And you are right. We have to see the whole thing in a different way, and marketing is part of that. Marketing and dialogue with consumers, because the only way to get out of that is to change the paradigm, to involve consumers in what we do, to allow consumers to see where products come from, to see what the makers do, how the makers make products, because they don't know it today. The transparency is not there, and the supply chain. It's not a supply chain which is transparent, the one of fashion. So in this, with the new paradigm that empower consumers, then we create a new form of value, which create goodwill, which create enhanced brand recognition, which is an asset, which is an intangible asset. I think the future of this industry and of artisans in this industry goes through this. And I see it coming, but now shut up, otherwise you say you speak
Do you think the average consumer really cares about how it's made?
Listen, it's a matter of age. There are some age range in which they don't care a damn about how things are made. There are some age range here and here in which they do care about that. But I see this coming because how things are made is becoming a function of how we manage the world of tomorrow and how we address the issues of the world of tomorrow, which is inequality and conflict. If you don't address how things are made, inequality and conflict, which is a function of inequality, are going to remain there. And we are going to live in a world which is very difficult. In Africa, where we work, average age, here it's 47, average age is 18. There's a mountain of young people with no work, with no possibility to have a decent life through work. They're all moving to Europe. I live in Geneva. I stay 8 months per year on traveling, but I'm supposed to live in Geneva. We have all this kind of people who is coming now, and Europeans are freaking out. But it's a function of how you organize the supply chains.
Barak. Okay. You can applaud again if you want. Okay. Barak, you're going to be able to follow this one? Or?
I don't think so.
Barak, we know each other, and before sustainability was being openly discussed, you were really pioneering this work as a sustainability expert for some of the largest, most prestigious retail companies and luxury brands in the world. How have you seen the industry evolve over the past 5, 10, 15 years?
I guess it's good to put it in the context of sustainability and what does it mean for fashion industry first, because when I started, it was all around compliance issues. We've seen many challenges in the supply chain. It wasn't even at the level of what's happening with Homework or Artisan, but it was the first-tier suppliers where there were questions around child labor, forced labor, minimum wage. So in some ways, that has been quite well formalized, and there's an understanding of at least how to approach it in terms of what standards we're looking for. But that didn't necessarily take away a full list of the issues out of the table either. What has been an interesting shift in the past decade is suddenly environment became a critical component of when we say sustainability, what do we need to deal with? So that changed the dynamic around the role of what do we want to do about humans versus the environment. And rightly or wrongly so, a lot of companies saw opportunity tackling climate change issues first and foremost when they wanted to tackle sustainability. That meant that there are opportunities potentially for cost saving in the way they dealt with their supply chains. Hence really focused on things like the energy use, logistics, and transportation, which took some of the attention away from the human condition in the supply chain itself. So the conversation around what's happening from a sustainability perspective had several different directions it's taking, including looking at how deep do we want to go in the supply chain, all the way down to artisans and raw material sourcing, but also how to deal with supply chain itself, our corporate governance. So that expansion of the understanding of what sustainability is actually made it a bit more diluted, the conversation, and the role of artisans is something that needs a bit more focused attention. So it's great to see conversations like this taking place so that the issues can be viewed from bottoms up and understanding what role artisans play in every aspect of sustainability across that chain, and try to bring that balance in the dynamics as well, so that the brands can understand what role they have to play in addressing the challenges.
So you would both say there's a rising consumer interest in authenticity, heritage, and social responsibility.
I would say so. This is what fashion used to be. If you think about this, when I was young, which was like the First World War, there was, I lived in Italy and it was full of artisans. I lived in Tuscany, which is, I always say this, it's the best part of Italy. The rest of Italy is a rough copy of Tuscany. And it used to, it's true, it's a matter of fact. It was full of fashion brands. Some of the big ones were already there, Ferragamo, the mythical ones, and it was full of artisans working with them. And consumers were able to recognize the authenticity and the exclusivity of a product. I remember a Gucci bag of my mother of 45 years ago. It's still there. She still uses that, and it's still gorgeous. Then at a certain moment, we discovered mass production, standardization of labor, compression of cost, big marketing strategies, the business model changed, and today we are in this mess in which you have a fashion product and you don't know where it was made. In the majority of cases, they are all the same. Look at the bags in the shops and tell me when you see a beautiful bag. When I was young, you were able to see that in a shop window. Now it's not possible anymore. There are a few exceptions, of course, especially the ones we make for the brands, but there are these exceptions. So I think it's a value that the consumers are going to rediscover and to value again. Madonna Bona.
Well, I want to bring the other side. We cannot fight against what's happening with change around us. The reality is we have nearly 9 billion population around the world, and automation is here to stay. So there's no value in saying that we are going to go against automation. It's about looking at how to differentiate artisan work from what's happening to the industry itself. Even working with young talent and young designers, we are trying to bring the craft and art element together with the technology, because we recognize that there's a place for all the different approaches. And that automation is not necessarily a bad thing for certain product categories, but it can be a way to also highlight what's the value of craft, because now you're able to put two of them next to each other and show the difference.
So do you think automation, do you think automation motivates more handcraft or actually discourages it?
It opens the door to offer an alternative to the typical product that we're seeing. And having maybe 500 students graduating from fashion design every year, and I see a whole range going in every direction. Some of them are using the new tools that we brought on board to our university. For example, we have the fully automated knitting machines from Shimeseki, where you can design a garment in CAD and then basically hit enter, and it will knit it fully automated without a single hand touching on the garment, which you can take and put it on yourself. But it looks very different. It feels very different as a product. It doesn't mean there's not a place for it. All the way to the other designers that are actually really going further deep into understanding what's craft and the old traditional skills, and leveraging them to showcase what are the unique products that can be created out of that. And as I said, when you put them next to each other, you clearly see the difference. And there's an appreciation for both from the consumer side as well as the designer side.
I don't see a big difference in between that automation and craft are so far. As automation and craft now live together, collaborate together, you make a last to make shoes with a 3D printer. Then you make a sole with the 3D printer, and then you finish the shoe with a manual technology and the stitching machine and all the rest. You do that today. You do CAD design for some kind of products, and then you put them on a stitching machine. Artisans face the challenge to master technology. And this is what can allow artisans to reach a level of productivity that can also allow the industry to pay living wage, for instance, which is a function of productivity of labor. It's not only a moral and legal requirement, but it's also a function of the productivity of labor. So the two things can really work together in a powerful way. But the point is, at the end of the story, you have to know how things are made, and you have to know that people have to be paid fairly. There's a big meeting in Europe on fashion, sustainability, and these things every year. And I told them, look, when do we treat about human rights in the supply chain? And they said, this is a long-term perspective. This is bullshit. It's a perspective of today.
Simona, you forged some very interesting partnerships with the industry's most esteemed luxury brands like Stella McCartney, Marni, Vivienne Westwood, introducing into their collections handmade work like Maasai beading from Kenya and hand weaving in Burkina Faso. What is the experience like for designers when they're introduced into this world of rare techniques and niche skills?
Glory to Vivienne. She's been the first one with us, and she's been with us for 14 consecutive seasons, producing every season constantly with us. United Arrows in Japan, they created a brand to work with us. Idun here in New York, they have a wonderful line of work with us. And then Aurora James, Brother Vellis, have a lot of people in New York that work with us. To answer your question, the approach is always an approach of astonishment. Because designers are so caught into the supply chain and into the supply chain of raw materials, which is very controlled today, that when they discover new products, new materials, new skills, they get excited. Then they have to meet the business model. Then when they go home, they have some business manager who says, hey, this is the cost that you can pay, this is this, this is this, this is that. Where we have met designers like the ones I mentioned, and many more, we work with a big distributor in Australia, Mimco, we work with a lot of people who really engage in creating value with artisans and with consumers with a full traceability system, with a complete idea of what's the impact of the process on the artisans. When you find them, the result is that you create value. So we created new lines of work. We created new lines of bags, new lines of shoes, new lines of fabric. And this, what you really see, needs the involvement of consumers. Without the consumers, these partnerships are nothing. So the communication, the marketing, the knowing the story part is fundamental.
Let me ask you a very practical question. I'm sure in the room there are a lot of artisans or people who represent artisans and designers. How do they find each other? How do they connect together? If I'm an artisan in Africa and I'm a designer in New York, I don't know, and I want to do this and I want to follow this path. How do I do that? How do I make that happen?
You call it a bloody good question. This is the definition. Wherever we work, we create a hub. You're right. Many artisans in the places where we work belong to marginalized communities. They're in the middle of nowhere. So we create a hub, which is a trade and a product development interface in between brands and artisans. So the brands come there to the hub, they do the product development with the artisans, and this hub organizes all the production and logistics. Then the artisans, through the assistance that we give, because we are the UN at the end of the day, are enabled to form cooperatives and to become suppliers of this hub. At the end of our intervention, this hub is taken over by private impact investors. It happened in Kenya. It's a private company now. and it works as a normal company in the supply chain. But there, you have the problem of the business model. Because if you are a company in a supply chain with a business model like the one I described before, your margins are compressed. Such a hub needs a net margin, a gross margin of 30%, 30 to 40%. It's huge, but it's feasible. But today, in the business model, is 5 to 10%. So that's the reason why I was referring to the business model. It's very difficult for a brand to go straight to an artisan, I mean in Bobo Dioulasso in Burkina Faso. But with this kind of intermediaries, it's possible. In two of the countries where we work, in Mali and in Burkina Faso, the hub belongs to the cooperative of artisans already. We are going to launch work in Afghanistan. I see Zolaika somewhere there. And we are going to launch similar work in Afghanistan, in the north of Afghanistan, with wool herders who bring up the animals and then to try to spin and to weave this wool in there. Again, a hub, an intermediary, which belongs to them and which enables them to have this dialogue. It's a very good point. Without this, it's impossible.
Barak, as the Dean of Parsons, you have a unique exposure to the millennial class of rising industry professionals who have enormous power to enter the field more enlightened than ever when it comes to fashion production. And as an educator, you're also in a unique position to help shape ideas and approaches to the fashion industry. What are you seeing from students as it relates to luxury?
Well, I guess I want to talk about not just luxury, but also creation. And the one thing, what we are trying to also do is what do we want to see out of them, as well as what we see as the trends that they're interested in. So one critical component is we are questioning what's the future of design and what's the future of designer. That's changing very quickly, and their interest in what they want to take part is also changing. So with that in mind, also, if you look at in our spaces, it's not just driven by saying that I'm the most creative individual out of the classes I graduate, but there's a much better understanding of making, which becomes critical when you want to do any partnership, especially with artisans around the world. So we've recently created a making center on our second floor that brings in a lot of tools all the way from the craft way of doing things to the technology and combining those. So that combination enables them to think in a different way. In some way, they're playing that role of craftsman and the artisan as they learn how to do things, and then take it all the way to the design level. The other thing we are seeing is that there's a lot more interest in understanding what is transparency in the design process. How do we have a much more fair approach to the way we create? And with that in mind, we are shaping our curriculum. So one critical element that we've done to bring change is introduced a new pathway called fashion systems. So the role of designer is not anymore just to create a collection, but to think about as how do I create a system and a business model that's addressing the needs of the future. So within that model, I think there's an appreciation that there's a shared value working with all of the people across the supply chain and giving visibility to what they do. So we can say transparency is critical, sustainability is critical, co-creation is critical, and sharing also what is earned across the whole supply chain is critical for the young talent. So I'm a bit more hopeful for the future because there's a lot of interest to think about the existing system and do it in a different way. And we already see examples of that coming out.
So how does a student define success for fashion?
And well, in some ways, they don't define it as I want to go into the luxury brand and work for a creative director anymore. They used to think that way. Now the technology and the tools in their hand enables them to do things differently. So most of the time they are freelancing or creating their business concepts, but at the same time looking for solutions that's going to really change the industry. So a good example which CFDA has supported for the past 2 years is one of our graduates, John Coy. She has created her own concept, which she calls a movement. It's not a brand. And this movement is about working with the creators and the artisans locally, first and foremost in New York, So with her community that she works with in Brooklyn, she co-creates garments that are all hand stitched and hand beaded, that are sold for very luxury price points at the moment at Bergdorf and several other places. And her whole concept is to be able to replicate this around the world. So she's looking at how to work across Africa, Brazil, Russia, work with a lot of artisans to do this co-creation and share the value of the money that's earned as well with them, and make them part of the whole messaging, not only for the product creation itself, but also the branding and the marketing and even the presentation of it together with the communities as part of that journey. So it's a very different approach.
There's a lot of talk about, for both of you, there's a lot of talk about cultural appropriation in fashion these days, and that designers are pilfering from artisans and non-Western cultures. It used to be considered just inspiration, but now there's a political correctiveness around it. Is that killing creativity, or is that ensuring some rightful ownership of an idea?
It ensures ownership of an idea. We must not exaggerate on these things, because if you exaggerate on this, you cannot do anything anymore. But when you have, and it's a real life example, a Masai beaded collection of bags, all developed in Kenya and then produced in Italy, that's something that we frown upon. If you develop something in a place, and if you develop something with a cultural heritage and with the people of the place, it's nice to have the production happening there in order to give some value back to this place. This is the ABC. I mean, if I come to your house and I get some tea, at least I have to say thank you. It's not that I get the tea and then I throw the cup away and out of the window. And so this is the thing. It's a delicate balance, because regulating this is very difficult. Where does the creativity finishes? Where does the inspiration, and so on? But in the world of today, thanks to artisans, thanks to the presence of artisans, when you have some times of inspiration, you can produce in there using the artisans of the place. I wanted to add that I would like to be a student of Burak.
You're welcome anytime. Just to add to that, I think we should see this as an opportunity to recognize, one, whatever the reason brands tap into that cultural elements, they have proven that there is consumer interest in that culture and what they offer, number one. And then the other challenge that I'm even presenting to our students is that there is a chance to turn this tide around and make the artisans the face of this creation and direct access to consumer. So if there's a way to enable all of those cultural elements to be directly produced and provided to an end consumer, recognizing the contributions of that community, maybe this conversation on cultural appropriation will disappear, and it will be about celebrating what that culture has offered to the rest of the world.
In working with some of those big brands, obviously you've had success, but have you had any experience where there's been resistance, and what do you think the resistance comes from in terms of aligning with artisans and more handcrafted?
A lot of resistance, a lot of shut doors, a lot of them. For one brand we work with, we have at least 5 to 7 brands that had said no. At the very beginning, I used to go around in London with a long black box, which we call the coffin, full of the materials we had in Kenya where we worked, and we rang to the bell of Vivienne Westwood. To many people say, "Who is it?" It's the UN with the coffin. And one day Vivienne said, "I want to see you," because that's Vivienne. That's nice, a coffin, yes. And we started working together. But the problem is always there, and the problem is the business model. It's the business model because they want to work with people who accept the standardization of work I described before, who are available to do product development in very long time and very expensive product development, badly paid, and who are available then to do production in a very short time and badly paid as well. So that's always the problem. If you don't belong to an existing supply chain, you are not somebody who has proven to be available to do that. And so there is suspicion. Then there is a lack of knowledge of what is the timing of an artisan. An artisan needs a different timing. timing. Even if you are, you have to have some degree of mechanization, automation, and all the rest. But it's a different timing, because in product development, you need to be very focused, and you need to be sure that what you develop then goes into production, or you don't recover the investment of product development. And that's another thing. The industry today is accustomed to doing product development as a research. So they do a mountain of product development, and then they scarcely pay it. I have a lot of artisans, very good artisans in Africa, that can tell you the story. I've met this brand, I've met this brand, I've met this brand. They did all the product development, and then production was negligible.
At Parsons, you have students from all over the world. Do you find there is a certain geographic tendency to be more sustainable or artisan in an approach to work?
What impressed me the most is to see, so just to put it in context, we have 132 countries represented in the school. So pretty much the whole world is there to begin with. We have overall in the design school 5,500 students that are studying across bachelor, associate, and graduate degrees. There is more and more an interest from all of the countries that we see to work back in their homeland and to be able to tap into those skills. What worries me in the big picture is, correct me if I'm wrong, is the total number of artisans is declining overall. And as mentioned, with this trend around the price that an artisan receives and their role in the supply chain doesn't justify most people to stay in their, especially smaller towns, but encourages them to go into urban environments to seek other job opportunities. So this makes it even more challenging to be able to revise some of the existing skills and be able to highlight and bring it to the next generation. So the hope that we have is through young designers working back, identifying these specific skills and techniques and creating partnerships to give back in a much bigger way than the traditional supply chain is one way of solving the issue itself. It'll be a smaller scale, but there will be much more number of designers engaging, and in some ways, Simone is showing that with the number of designers that are smaller brands that are also working in the communities. But I think I'm even seeing skills that are being highlighted from countries we don't normally hear about. Even in China, I see so many of our students going back to China and working with artisans and highlighting stuff that many of the Chinese in the cities don't know about. So that gives me hope that there's chance, but it has to be done in a much more specialized way and definitely out of this existing supply chain model of the big brands.
I mean, there's a clock clicking here, which I think we're about to end the discussion part and open it up to questions. Is that the format? Yeah? So go there first.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I run a nonprofit, an artisan group called Artisan. We hire Palestinian refugees, and we have a brand. And the struggle is what you present.
You're in
is
Kenya.
interesting. What?
You're in Kenya.
No, Palestinian. Yes. So we do embroidered shoes and bags, handbags. And the struggle you presented that most of the brands come to Artisan. The idea is good, but I want to challenge you. Why not empowering them to create their own brand? Like, I want them to know my brand. I don't want them to appropriate our craft and use it somewhere. Why not empowering the local brand rather than bringing all of these big companies?
Absolutely. Yes. That's a very good idea. Absolutely. Are you kidding? We are trying to do this in a couple of settings, and there's the difficulty of the access to the market and all the rest. But the world is changing. Social media, consumers, engagement, and all this will become possible. You need a platform to reach consumers in a consistent way. So that's the problem of an intermediary. But branding the work of the artisans is one of the challenges of the future. And there in Palestine, you have some wonderful embroidery, beautiful embroidery. I've been there visiting the groups, and it's one of the dreams of my life. So let's meet after this conference and let's talk about it.
Just to, I fully agree as well, and that's the kind of the holy grail of finding access to market and do it in your own way. We are even seeing, so one of our graduates is from Pakistan, and he's creating a label around similar concept, working with artisans to do all hand-stitched shoes and creating a whole brand around it. And it's just going to be through digital means that he will be marketing. He's, as we speak, is planning to launch it in the next coming months. Also, I was just in Morocco, and I've seen another platform called Anu. I visited, that was here at Nest before. What was impressive is they created a website that has a very strong backend that enables artisans to be able to upload their product and promote it directly to an end user. And even when I was there, I've seen purchases being made from US directly from the artisan living in the high Atlas Mountains and being able to get the full price point back to the artisan itself. So there are solutions out there that's worth looking at.
Thank you so much. I was really amazed by your model in Burkina Faso, where the hub belongs to artisans. And I want to share also my fears that, like, you see, we notice that handmade is always beautiful, good, but expensive. And it's not really rewarding to artisans because, for example, like something that took them like a month to complete costs a very little money. And it's not motivating for the young generation. It's like youth are not motivated to weave, to do just some handworks. And I'm afraid that one day, these talents will disappear. So I want to know what you do to motivate young people to get involved.
We pay them well.
Yeah.
We remunerate the work well.
Yeah.
You've got to remunerate the work well. I mean, a meter of Bogolan from Mali, or let's say Damfani. You speak about Burkina. A meter of Damfani, grand largeur, c'est-à-dire un mètre, a meter, not la petite largeur, la grande largeur. A meter of that should cost minimum 12 to 17, 18 euros. And a meter of this poplin here costs 2 euros. So luxury, well paid, fair wage, living wage, and all the rest. And giving value to the work. If you don't do this, you are right. The skills disappear. The Damfani was disappearing from Burkina exactly because of that. Because it was underpaid, it was not recognized, but because it was sold, and that's a problem of management, a problem of marketing, it was sold as a cheap local material. It was not sold as the beautiful thing which is. You have, in Burkina, there was a revolutionary in the 80s, Thomas Sankara, who changed the way in which the society worked, and he made this possible by enabling women to own business, to weave, to all the rest, and Damfani became what it is. But then it was marketed in the wrong way. So marketing, positioning, and attaching the right value to things. You are right, otherwise, what's the meaning of that? What's the meaning of weaving for a week and then getting starving?
Also, I wanted to talk about my concern on like efficiency, because handmade takes long to make, and that discourages the young population still. I'm not sure why they can't concentrate like older people.
No, it doesn't discourage. No.
I wonder that if artisans are gathered in little factories, maybe that can help.
They are gathered in production centers where there is an efficiency, of course. In the case, if you want a practical example, the stage of yarn preparation, lansouple, the preparation of the things that goes on the loom has been mechanized in our place with some second-hand machines that we imported from Italy. So this stage, which is very long, very tiring, and badly paid, is mechanized. And then you go to hand weaving in a center where they're all together, where conditions are good. So again, what we were saying before with Barak, it's a mix of things with automation, with mechanization, with manual work, because the future is not made only of manual work, but all together they can make the magic of that.
So let's get another question in over here. Go ahead, you.
Wall covering and textiles. And our big emphasis is on handmade, and we have been, over the last 7 years, extremely successful. But we've also had some great failures. And it has made me very nervous. We've lost a lot of money because of quality control. We're in an industry where we have to, if we have a good seller, it lasts 7 to 10 years, unlike fashion where it's in, it's out. So we have to promise that sample our designer has and holds on to 2 years later when it's ordered, matches in color and so forth. We can adopt with time. We understand artisans take more time. That's not a problem. But where we really have trouble is quality control. And so now I'm very nervous when I don't really know, but I love the work and I want to do it, and I don't know how, and I'm not sure where to go now for that.
We have exactly the same problem. We had the same problem. We are paying now a huge penalty to a customer here in New York while I speak. On Bogolan, which is a fabric of Mali with natural dyes. And you know, natural dyes are always different because you take the leaf of a tree today, it gives a color. In 1 month, it gives you the same tree, another tonality of color. So you have to do 2 or 3 things. The first one, you have to explain this is an artisanal product, and you have to create a labeling and communication scheme on this. And you have to agree on this with your customer before and in written. The second one, the customer has to communicate this to consumers in a proper way, because if they get you as an industrial supplier, as they usually do, you are fucked. They kill you. The third one is that you have to standardize the production in a way which is feasible with natural dyes and with artisans. I give you an example. In the case of Bogolan, the Bogolan was made, a piece of Bogolan of 20 meters or 15 meters, 7 artisans at work on this on decoration. So you had 7 different handprints on that. Of course, there was inconsistency. So what we did, we started the production system with this elevated on a table, very well blocked, and 1 artisan every 10 or 15 meters. So you have batches of 15 meters that are consistent. Then the design is always the same, but there are variations, and this is explained in the contract with which we sell it to the brand. The stabilization of the natural dyes, as Barak says, technology helps. You know that in the natural dyes we need some stabilizer like potassium, tannin, and so on. Instead of getting this stabilizer from local things, very small suppliers, we bought them industrially made. They are natural materials, industrially made. They are stable. Along with the leaves and the others, they create a stabilization. Of course, you still have variations, but you are within the acceptable range. So it's a mixture of negotiation, stabilization, and accepting what you have. You are in a tough business.
All right, I'm afraid we've run out of time. So thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you, Simone and Barak, for your inspiring comments and for letting me be part of this panel. So that concludes our discussion of the panel. I want to...
That's great.
Thank you, Stephen. Barak. Thank you so much. Oh, we got to get a picture. Fabulous. And I forgot to thank our wonderful lunch panelists, Heidi from UNHCR and Fidelis from Kenya with Heshami. Really inspiring work there as well. So thank you for those of you who attended. It was a real treat to meet them for the lunch. All right. So thank you again, Stephen, Barak, and Simone. All right. Thank you so much. All right. So our next value of the new hand worker economy that we're focusing on, and all of these obviously are starting to blend into each other. We're going to continue on the topic of transparency. All right. How are we doing? We doing next? Okay, good. So with an estimated 300 million home-based workers in the world, and as much as 20 to 60% of garment production being subcontracted at some point during the production process to hand workers, which is a huge variation, by the way. We should be able to get a much more precise number than that. That's part of the problem, is that statistic. 20 to 60% being done at home. There's not only a need, but also an opportunity to increase the transparency, as has been discussed all day, beyond the four-walled factory. All right. Oh, no problem, Simone. You got your phone? All right. Here we go. Solved. Perfect. So by making home-based work an ethical option, we can significantly grow women's participation in the global economy. And I'm thrilled to hand the floor over to Ron Cordes, snappily dressed today for the occasion. Thank you so much for your ongoing support of Nest, Ron. He's co-founder of the Cordes Foundation, and he's going to take us into the final phase of today's program. So over to you.
Thank you, Brendan. I have one stylish tie in my closet. I thought today was a good day to wear it. So let me provide a little context before I open it up with a conversation with our panelists. Well, we often think of production for fashion and home industries as happening inside factories. Industry estimates suggest that anywhere between 20 to 60% of garment production does not happen inside a regulated factory, but are instead subcontracted to small workshop and home-based workers around the world. The ILO estimates there's as many as 300 million of these home workers globally, and most of them are women. Operating in the informal economy with little visibility, typically earning low-rate wages, these hand workers are often the most vulnerable members of the supply chain. As we've experienced firsthand in our own travels in our foundation, for many women in the world, work outside the home is forbidden or unsafe, or because of family responsibility and childcare, leaving the home for work is often not an option. So by making home care or homework safe and visible, there's an enormous opportunity not only to grow women's workforce participation, but also to strengthen it. So today we're joined by industry leaders from West Elm, Target, Eileen Fisher, and Jaipur Living to discuss the new Nest compliance program for homes and small workshops, which launches publicly here today at the United Nations. The program is the result of 3 years of collaboration amongst Nest and its brand and artisan partners, as built upon the foundation of the nonprofit's 11 years of experience in artisan business development. These brand partners all worked alongside Nest to pilot the new program with more than 42 artisan businesses across 5 countries, bringing improved transparency and increased well-being to an estimated 11,000 hand workers. At the core of the program is a set of more than 130 standards spanning 6 categories: worker rights and business transparency, child advocacy and protection, fair compensation and benefits, worker well-being, health and safety, and environmental care, all designed to meet the specific needs of home-based and small workshop producers. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. And they're in a different order than I have listed here. So I'm going to read them in the order that I have so I don't mess up their information. Douglas Guiley is the SVP of Global Sourcing at West Elm and Williams-Sonoma. Ivanka Mamek is the Senior Director of Responsible Sourcing at Target. Luna Lee is the Human Rights Leader at Eileen Fisher. Yash Ranga is Shareholder Engagement Partner at Jaipur Rugs Foundation. And Chris Van Bergen is the Chief Operating Officer at Nest. Each of these speakers has been deeply involved in bringing this project to life, so we'll take this great opportunity to discuss the impetus for this program and the impact that it stands to make, both socially and environmentally. So I'd like to start the conversation with West Elm, the project's founding partner. So Doug, as a brand, West Elm has been a powerful advocate for global artisan production and promotion of handicraft, as exemplified by your commitment to sourcing handcraft as 20% of your product assortment. When you approached Nest in 2014, you'd identified a major hole in the industry for transparency beyond the four-walled factory. And while West Elm has a strong Fair Trade USA partnership, you were also looking for tools applicable to the significant portion of the supply chain representing home-based production. So can you share with us, Doug, your impetus for approaching Nest on this project and elaborate on your social and economic goals for kicking off this project together?
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to go back a little bit. Before I joined West Elm, I worked for a large apparel retailer. And at one point during, we were doing some manufacturing out of India, and we were doing hand-embroidered wovens. And at some point, they made the decision unilaterally to say no more homeworking at all. And they brought it all in-house, or forced all the suppliers to bring it in-house. And there was something about that that always just kind of sat with me not right. That, you know, is that the right way to approach a problem in an industry that is so large? So if you think about the home craft sector, you know, anecdotally they say it's the second largest sector, second largest employer or employment base. So how do you address an issue like that? The industry was taking a standard of just saying we're not going to address it, we're just going to force it in the factory. So when I came to West Elm, the philosophy at West Elm was significantly different. They embrace homeworking, they embrace craft, and believe that there is a value in how you do it and how you bring it to market. But there is still an issue in terms of, is it done in an ethical way? And that was still something that we were wrestling with, and how do we address that situation? And we looked through various options and kind of kept running into brick walls, because everything was always looked at through the prism of how you run your four-wall factory compliance programs, and it's not applicable. One is not a standard to the other. And so we had started working with Nest on some various projects, and one day we were sitting in my office with Jennifer, Chris, and Rebecca, and we were talking about their standards that they already were using for their programming as how they assess artisans. And their suggestion was, do you think there's an opportunity to look at that standard and say, could we build something bigger out of it that could be turned into an industry standard? Absolutely. Said, you know what, we'll give you full access to our supply chain, and let's go test it ourselves. Let's just go see what we can learn from it. So I truly think it was 3 years ago this week, we were in Bohol, Philippines. And if any of you have ever been to the Philippines right before Christmas, it is just one of the craziest places to be. And we spent about 2-3 days going from village to village, trying to understand how our baskets are made in a distributed model. So at any given time, the one vendor that we work with, 33.3, they can anytime can flex up to 5,000 individual workers. So as we're driving around, we see people sitting on their front porch, and they're weaving our baskets. And so that's when we started to say, okay, how do you really start to assess and understand, and then could you put some kind of certification around saying that this is made in a standard that we all believe is ethical? And so that was the genesis of where we started it. We tested it. Then we asked other partners that we knew were interested, Patagonia, Target. We knew there were others out there that wanted to, PVH, I don't think they're in the room, but Eileen Fisher, yep. I just figured since you're here, you're right. You are. Oh, they are here. Oh, they are here. Okay, cool. So it was more about saying, okay, now that we've tested it, now can we get other people who want to accomplish the same thing, and can we test it in a larger way, and what can we really do with it? We also brought in some third parties to help us validate that the standards meet what a compliance standard should look like. And so that's why we are to where we are today, is now I can start to work with Nest on auditing that 20% that we believe can actually be larger. And now I can start talking to the customer with a certification that says you should feel comfortable that this purchase, you're buying product that is made in an ethical way.
Terrific, thank you. When we think of artisan production, we typically think of small batch production. For someone like Target, as a huge multi-SKU company, how is transparency to home-based production relevant to you And why is it so important to Target to invest in these supply chains?
Thanks, Ron. I think before I begin, I should just let everybody know that this chair is still buzzing from Simona's energy. So if I start channeling him, it's the chair's fault. It's not mine.
It might be his phone.
Probably a good place to start is, for those of you who don't know Target, just to give you a brief overview. We are a large diversified retailer with over 1,800 stores. We source from more than 30 countries, and we are the United States' second largest importer of record. So I think you'll agree with me that there is the opportunity to be a progressive force for good at a scale that is often unparalleled by other retailers. And as we heard this morning, like Levi's and Patagonia, the majority of our products are made in factories. But there are a number of products that are artisanal or involve traditional production processes. So, for example, if you think about our reed baskets or some of the hand beading that you will find on pillows. Now, at Target, our goal is to make it easy and affordable for our guests to make responsible purchases through the sourcing that we do responsibly. It's also important for us to facilitate the global connections between those people that make the products and those that are purchasing them. And if Stephen was here, I'd answer his question as to, do consumers care? The answer is increasingly so. And the only way that we can facilitate those global connections is by investing in programs like Nest that give us deeper visibility into the supply chain. Through these partnerships, what we're able to do is to help those suppliers get to compliance and then to move beyond compliance and work with them to actually invest in worker well-being. In this way, we're able to facilitate the purchasing through our guests to have a positive social impact, and also for the home-based workers to retain their traditional crafts. You know, and ultimately, if we go back to our supply chain and we think about how vast it is, we've actually got the power to inspire others and to facilitate change amongst other vendors, other suppliers, other companies. And this is really what we want to be doing through this partnership with Nest.
Thank you. Looking at this project through your human rights lens, how important is it for the industry to improve well-being not only for the people who are producing at greatest volume, but also for those who are the most vulnerable? At Eileen Fisher, as a brand with many social responsibility initiatives, what is your advice to other brands as far as recognizing where a program like this fits within an overall sustainability agenda?
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I think it would help to share a little bit about our Vision 2020 sustainability plan. So it does cover both the social and the environmental side. And, you know, on the social side specifically, there is, we actually have some goals related to artisans and cultural sustainability. And I think that, you know, we know very well, we have our designer now in the audience, you know, the artisanal products that we make really enhances our collection. And we know that we cannot achieve our Vision 2020 plan without including the informal sector, even though it's a very, very tiny % of our product. And within Eileen Fisher, we have a group of people, an internal team called the Artisanal Product Team that helps shepherd the work. So it's a group that's cross-functional, and we have people from design, social consciousness, merchandising, production, and we meet once a month, you know, to talk about various topics from quality control to social, environmental problems that we are encountering by working with artisans and how to solve it together. So I think, you know, after 6 years of doing this work with artisans, like for me, we are still learning so much every day, and I never thought that I would have to learn about quality control and design in order to do human rights work. But I think, in terms of, the vulnerability versus volume question, we do not value factory workers' lives more than artisans' lives. So I think we prioritize our human rights work through the vulnerability lens. It's not just about the volume. Of course, it's the leverage that we have to impact positive change is important at the individual sites. And surprisingly, what we have learned is that sometimes we might be only making one scarf with an artisanal supplier, but we might be 60% of their total volume because they're so small. So in that sense, we do have a lot of leverage compared to a bigger factory where we might be ordering what we consider a lot of product and it's a tiny bit of their production volume. So I think it has to be looked at differently. And it's, in terms of advice for other brands, I think it's be curious, know your supply chain, like a lot of other panelists have said, map it, visit it, talk to your suppliers, learn from the communities, and know that the home workers are probably in your supply chain, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, most likely. And also know that you don't have to start from scratch. There are a lot of brands that have already embarked on this journey. You can learn from, each other and your own suppliers. So.
At this stage, Target has worked with Nest to implement training and assessments of 6 Target vendors, producing in India, Kenya, Turkey, and the Philippines. What have been some of the primary learnings that Target has taken away from these initial pilots, and how might they be informing ideas about your overall sustainability agenda moving forward?
First of all, I'd like to say that we've learned a lot through our partnership with Nest. So Rebecca and Chris, thank you very, very much. This morning, Rebecca introduced us to the idea that home-based workers or hand workers are a massive global force and, that there is power in the collective. One of our key learnings has been that it's important when looking at the collective not to take them as a homogeneous group. It's really important to stand back and recognize that there are unique socio-economic and geographical differences that impact workers and that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. So, for example, what we've seen in a place like India is while there's been a lot of training in traditional crafts, actually there's a paucity of work opportunities. In the Philippines, we've seen the opposite. So if we take something like traditional basket weaving, there's a huge demand for this and a paucity of supplied skilled craftspeople. A second learning that we've had is that, as an industry, we're really looking at technological solutions, be that with the way that we produce our products or the way that we engage with the makers. And actually, when it comes to these technological solutions, once again, it's important to take into account the geographic specifications or specificities of where the makers are based. So in some parts of the world, for example, if we think about Kenya, where we worked with a group of artisans near Nairobi, smartphone penetration rates are actually very high. So you're able to use technology to reach those workers, to train them. But if we go back to a place like India, smartphone penetration rates are really low, and we need to think of a different way to engage those artisans. A third learning that we've had, and to borrow the terminology that Werner introduced us to this morning, is that this work has the power to be economic independence for women. we often use the term women's empowerment. And an example of this that Nest actually introduced us to was in the Philippines, where there is a powerful example of this in practice. A woman who had migrated from a village herself due to poor economic opportunities has established a group of craftspeople that come and actually live for free on land that she has purchased and built housing on this land, and they work as basket weavers, earning fair wages and living for free in the housing that she provides for them, because she sees it as her duty to help the people from her village. And in fact, we've seen that studies show that typically women invest anywhere from 60 up to 90% of their income back into the community and into the family. Again, this is something that we heard from the keynote address this morning. In terms of our own programs and the learnings that we've taken from the pilot into the way that we approach our sustainability agenda, I think there are 3 things that I'd like to highlight. One is that change doesn't happen overnight. We need to start with getting visibility into these supply chains and understanding their complexity. Secondly, we know that actually you can't achieve the type of tipping point and change that's needed alone. No one organization can do this. And so at Target, partnerships are key to the way that we approach work in this area. We've had a long-standing partnership with Goodweave to be looking at how the working conditions and ensuring that there's no child labor and forced labor in the rug industry in India. We have a working partnership with Fairtrade USA. We have our partnership with Nest and with others. And we see great opportunity to not only leverage those partnerships, but to have these organizations working together to maximize the impact that we can have. And the third learning really is that, it's important to have industry-wide solutions to the problem. And I see Andrew sitting right at the back of the auditorium. What I would say to Andrew is, I think that you're right to be optimistic. I think that together, if we can get business and civil society and government working together, we're going to get to enabling that tipping point and the change that's needed to secure a better tomorrow today.
A unique perspective to the panel. Jaipur Living is a company that works with thousands of home workers all over India. Can you share with us some of the complexities of home-based production that set it apart from factory production, making it so critical for a program like Nest compliance for homes and small workshops to exist?
First of all, I would like to say namaste to everyone here. And thank you, Nest, Rebecca, for being with us in our journey. So Jaipur Rug's journey started with a very humble beginning in one of the villages in India with just 2 artisans, 9 looms, and a sum of $500, but with a very strong insurgent mission to serve the underserved customers. And this insurgency has always been motivating factor for us to turn out the challenges into opportunities and successes, what we have gained in last 39 years of our work in 600 villages in one of the world's most distributed supply chain, and not only revolutionizing the Indian drug industry, but also bagging a tag of being our founding father as the Gandhi of Indian drug industry. So the Indian drug industry is a very typical middleman-driven business model, wherein transparency, compliances are just the words that have been in past buzzwords for conversation. But at Jaipur Rugs and in Jaipur Living here, we have always focused that in order to serve the customer, it's the prime agenda as an organization to serve all the compliances that makes a customer confident, that makes communities confident that whomsoever they are working with, they are right in transparent system, with the company, and within their houses. And in our artisan base of 40,000 artisans, 85% of them are women. And since morning, I've been really happy to to talk on the subject of giving socioeconomic independence to women and the whole model at Jaipur Rugs Foundation, which is a non-profit arm of Jaipur Group. It's whole driven on the inclusive business model of socioeconomic development of these communities and especially women. And this compliance model with the Nest has really given us a next level of boost and a next level of confidence to work with the partners sitting here and to really develop that co-creative, collaborative mode of engagement so that everybody is benefited. And finally, the customers get a delight on face. So whatsoever, since morning and since the time I've been in conversation with Rebecca and Chris, I believe that, like coming together like this is just a beginning. Being together is progress. And if we all work together, that's the success. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
So now to the other side, to Chris. Nest is an organization with 11 years of experience in artisan business development, and it's actually your team who's on the ground administering these assessments. So can you walk us through what this process looks like for a brand that might be considering how to assess its home-based or decentralized suppliers, and what sets your on-site approach apart from a typical audit?
Sure. So our process looks very different from a normal factory audit. I mean, at the end of the day, we're an NGO, and our mission is really to serve the artisans and to provide opportunities for social and economic advancement for those businesses. And that permeates everything we do. It permeates the programming, like bringing 19 leaders from 12 countries who are all here right now, have been here for the week. It permeates the programming we do with almost 400 businesses across 60 countries, providing them business support either remote or on site. And so when we were tasked or requested, I guess, to build this type of program, we wanted to make sure that the compliance efforts that we generated had that same DNA. And so as a result of that, firstly, we wanted to make sure it was a multi-stakeholder effort. Steering committee full of brands, but also lots of industry experts. Most importantly, a lot of input from the artisan community, the craft-based community itself. We want to make sure that all those voices were recognized and that the program we developed was more a program about increasing the interconnectedness between the people in that supply chain. And I'll tell you what I mean. I mean, the supply chain within which we work, the workers themselves, mainly women, they've never really been talked to about the fact that their voice matters, or if there's an issue in the supply chain, if there's an issue with wages or treatment, that there is actually some place they can go. They've never really been talked to about that, primarily. A lot of the business leaders we work with have never been talked to about compliance in general. Most of them, the vast majority, are operating ethical businesses, but when they're dealing with a brand partner who wants to see what that means, they don't actually have the ability to physically demonstrate that. So it's a lot of trust-based relationships. It's a lot of kind of long-standing relationships and understandings between people without actually having standardized processes in place. And so we wanted to make sure that our program not only provided those guide rails for those businesses, but was done so in a way that everybody felt like they were active participants. And so when we get on the ground, what we really do, the first thing we do is we employ a training first, listen first approach. Because we have standards that are those guidelines, right? But every business leader, all of the artisan business leaders in the room know that you are the expert of your supply chain, and they all look extremely different. They could be 5,000 home workers in the Philippines weaving baskets in their houses. Could be a small workshop in California with 1 full-time and 2 part-time people. Those are both businesses that we consider artisan businesses. They both have value. So they're very different approaches there. So we wanted to make sure that the program that we developed meets those needs. And it starts really with training the business leaders on what the expectations are and working with them as far as understanding what is already in place. Because we're not going to come in with a one-size-fits-all approach. That is never going to work anywhere. The adoption rate would be horrible. And so why not embrace what's actually already happening and work with the artisan businesses hand in hand, not only the management, but all those subcontractors, and there can be layers upon layers of subcontractors, and the workers themselves, to really understand what's going on in the supply chain, really map it out so that everybody understands where the product is coming from, who's making it, what are the particular pain points and challenges. And the nice kind of benefit to that progress is that in addition to just compliance work, we're able to uncover all sorts of other pain points for those businesses. So all of a sudden the workers are thinking, wait, you mean I have a voice here? Somebody's going to listen to what I have to say. You know what, if you actually time the delivery of raw materials slightly differently, that would really improve how we can make our product, for example, or something like that. And so a great byproduct of this work is that the entire supply chain feels like they actually have value, right? And so we do that training. We do a training with the management on site, with the subcontractors. We meet with everybody, with the workers. We engage all of them. We then provide about 6 to 9 months of remote guidance for those managers, help them understand what the hurdles they are facing might be, and really brainstorm solutions around, are there particular issues around establishing standardized records, for example? That's often a big one because oftentimes there isn't a standardized record-keeping system in place where a brand or somebody like Nest or anybody could come and say, hey, how do I know you're paying fairly or you're paying on time? You don't have anything written down. And if you have a lot of subcontractors, they might resist against that. They might say, well, we've done it this way forever. Why do we really need to have this established? And so we work with the businesses, we work with the subcontractors to show them there's actually other value in just writing all this down on a piece of paper. There are other things that really benefit their business. There are other ways that it creates efficiencies within their business. So we provide that remote support for, again, 6 to 9 months, sometimes longer, sometimes less. Then we come back and we do an assessment. And we call it an assessment, not an audit, for a very, very purposeful reason. It's not somebody coming in with a clipboard and checking boxes, right? And I mean, this supply chain is often a marginalized population, often a population that has a general distrust for people coming in and asking all sorts of questions. So what we do is we come and we have a lot of conversations. It takes time. But it's done in a very, very meaningful way, and it's done through conversation. We get the information we need, but it's not, again, not a clipboard, not something that somebody who's invited me or one of my programming team into their house. I mean, that's and we're sitting with them, we're asking about their family, we're asking about the business, we're making sure that all that hard work we've done with the management level of the business, with the subcontractors, is trickling down, that they're actually being educated on what their roles and responsibilities are. Because for us, we have this set of standards, over 130. That's actually broken out as well. So for every player within the supply chain, they have different roles and responsibilities for each standard that we set. There's an overall standard, but then if you're the central business management, there are expectations placed upon you. If you're the subcontractor, there are slightly different expectations placed upon you. If you're a small workshop owner, if you're a home worker, what are those expectations? Obviously, for most home workers, we're not requiring them to, fill out massive reams of paper with records and attendance logs and all sorts of stuff. That is crazy, We're also not asking them to put up an illuminated exit sign in their house, because who has one of those in their house, right? So, we took this whole process, we took the Nest standards, as Doug indicated. We've had them for a long time, and we were using those internally. We took factory standards. We took a lot of input from brand partners, from industry experts. And we wanted to make something that actually made sense for this context, for small workshops, for home workers, so that it's not just us coming in, again, with this one-size-fits-all approach, or an approach where there are all these crazy regulations and restrictions and stipulations that just don't make any sense, because that defeats the purpose of this whole exercise. The project is really about transparency and about empowerment. I know I don't think she mentioned it, but that's a word Verna hates. She hates empowerment. I don't know why, but she does. But for us, it's really, we want to leave a site after the assessment's done, after the corrective action plan is delivered, and we want the business and the workers within that business and the subcontractors and those women who are weaving baskets in their houses, we want them to feel like, wow, this was a really positive experience. I now feel more connected not only to the subcontractors and the managers of the business I work with, but to the brand partners that are on the other side of the equation. And so for us, that's really what it's all about. It's making sure that it levels the playing field, it increases transparency, and it really does empower the entire supply chain.
Question to you, and it's a two-part question. Chris mentioned the importance of a multi-stakeholder approach. So how critical is cross-industry participation in making a program like Nest Compliance a success? And second, for a brand like West Elm, is this the beginning of a bigger industry-wide movement?
So I'll take the first question. I think the simple answer is yes. Do I think that this is... I think about four-wall factory auditing for a second, and I know we hate that word auditing, but if we think about that for a second, one of the biggest challenges is that we all grew up individually and created our own standards. And so now we're at a point where we're putting audit factories through audit fatigue. And it's a pain point now that we all recognize we need to fix, but we can't fix it because we all have our own standards and no one wants to necessarily give. So there is a movement afoot of trying to fix it, and it's painful. Well, if you look at where we are today, there has been no standard for an assessment that deals with this sector, and now there is. And so now it's like the whole thing is nice and tied in a nice bow, basically, for everybody to use. And everybody can assess to the same standard. So I think there's this unique opportunity of actually all of us going together and using a same standard so we can talk the same language, so we can make our customers understand what this is all about. And so it is a much different situation that we find ourselves in, which I think is unique and hugely opportunistic. So I think that's what's great about what's ahead of us. And then if I think about it just from a West Elm perspective, like I said, we're at 20% today. Do we think it can be bigger? We absolutely do think it can be bigger. We know that the customer, that our margins on handcrafted is better than it is on regular product. We know that where we're most successful is when we take our design aesthetic and use a technique and bring it to market. The customer loves it. And so is this an opportunity to grow it even bigger? Absolutely. And so it's a business opportunity as much as it is about a compliance opportunity.
Terrific. What a great way to close. Well, I would first like to thank all of our panelists. Could you please join me in thanking them? And then I'd like to invite Rebecca Van Bergen, founder and executive director of Nest, to the stage to assist me in unveiling the Nest Seal, which starting in 2017 can be leveraged by brands and artisan businesses alike to educate and empower consumers to choose ethically handcrafted items. But first, I'm told that we have a special announcement.
We should have a video. Can you turn the lights? Thank you.
While increasing efforts have been taken to ensure ethical production in factories, industry estimates indicate that as much as 60% of retail production is taking place outside the four-walled factory setting.
This enormous component of the supply chain is spread out across millions of small homes around the world, where production like embroidery, dyeing, and weaving is being performed scrupulously by hand.
Tens of millions of people are home workers for the fashion and home design industries, and most of them are women and mothers. Home-based artisan production is the second largest employer of women in developing economies, an estimated $34 billion global industry.
As part of the informal sector, artisan work is notoriously unregulated, underserved, and unprotected. But while alarming, these facts point most strongly towards one thing: opportunity.
Opportunity to bring sustainable change to tens of millions of people on a global scale.
In socio-political environments in which women are often forced into demoralizing and exploitive forms of labor, artisan homework has potential to provide a safe and empowering employment alternative. Crafting is a form of creative expression that can foster female camaraderie and therapeutic benefits similar to those realized when meditating.
Artisan homework makes use of skills that many women already possess, meaning they often need little or no new training to be employed. Artisan techniques have often been passed down through generations, making them cultural traditions worthy of preservation.
Around the world, responsibility of family care by large falls to women, often requiring them to be at home tending to large families. Craft is a type of employment that mothers can integrate into their daily routines, giving them the ability to earn an income while also caring for their children.
With more women sustainably employed as artisans, more families can be fed, more children can receive education, and entire communities stand to benefit.
The impact ripples outwards. This is the opportunity for good that comes from building a more sustainable and socially responsible industry for artisan and home-based production.
Nest is a nonprofit organization building a new handworker economy that connects craftspeople, brands, and consumers in a circular and human-centric value chain.
Today we invite you.
You. We invited you to be industry pioneers.
To join Nest and fellow brand leaders to begin taking positive steps towards building more socially responsible and economically sustainable relationships with artisans and home-based workers.
Because while the opportunity for millions of women deserves to be realized, the responsibility to make change a priority is ours to share.
And I think we have. So I think what's been really exciting about this journey is that it's a set of standards, which all of us find very exciting. It's a multi-page, very complex document, but what's extremely exciting is that today we're moving it from being our project to being a project that consumers can join us on the journey. And so we're also launching, hopefully, a consumer-facing seal today, which starting in 2018 will be on products that have gone through the supply chain transparency program that we're launching, which is very exciting. But I think what the video, Amber Valletta so beautifully said in the video, and everybody up here also reiterated, is that it is a movement and it's going to take lots of people to make that a reality. And so symbolically, we'd like to invite all of our steering committee members. Some are in the audience. Obviously, many of you are right here. Any of the other members of the companies that are part of the steering committee, our board of trustees, our advisory board, our founding board, the Nest staff, and the artisan business leaders who are here, as well as the speakers from today. That's a lot of people. It's going to be a lot of the room, to come and sign this code of conduct to ensure that moving forward we have a new and better handworker economy. So come do that. Do you guys want to go first? Yay. There's a lot of people I mentioned that are supposed to be making their way here to sign the code of conduct, and everyone's still sitting down. So you guys are going to have to move a little faster so we have time for closing remarks. Come on up. Thank you. I know we are making history. Thank you for saying that.
We're so proud, Rebecca, really. This is
I haven't given you a hug yet. I feel like I've tried to make my way to you like 6 times. Yeah, of course.
So now if you want to have more insights around rug, just
Let me get a picture of her.
I know you gotta get the nest part in.
I know, I was like rearranging. I'm like, wait a minute. I got it. Thank you.
My card's
more?
Yeah, should I tell people to sit back down or no?
No, it's finished. The few people that are left. Is this the end?
Yeah, it's the last one.
Okay. Oops. Did I just walk in front of that picture? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I think we're going to sit back down just for 10 more minutes and then everyone can mingle. Yeah. No, you can sit back down. Sarah is the Nest team member who is very often on the ground in the villages doing this work, so seeing her symbolically sign at the end is very appropriate. This is obviously a really exciting moment for Nest as an organization, but I think the more important thing to remember is that this is a really exciting moment and day for 300 million home-based workers around the world. And that's a daunting number, and so I think what's really exciting is that we're closing today, but we're opening a huge door to a new opportunity and a new era for this sector, and that will take all of us. And so we're so thrilled to see the seats filled today, and hope to continue the conversation with all of you so that in 2018 we can see this work realized in a new way. And so I want to just close with a huge thank you to our brands who have committed so much time and hard work to making today and this model a reality, to the artisan businesses who have flown in from 12 countries to be here and fighting jet lag for 4 long days of incredible programming. And then I think, Nest, there was a lot of mentions of my name, and I'm very appreciative of that, but the Nest team has been working from 6 a.m. until well past midnight every day this week to make today happen, and they've been running around behind the scenes making sure that this happened. So I would not be anywhere without them, and so I'm so eternally grateful to my team. So that's a huge thank you to all of you. So. So that's it. There's some press in the room, and we invite you to come down if you have 15 minutes and you want to ask questions of our panelists. And the rest of you, feel free to stay and mingle and ask any questions that we cut you off in the question periods that you're dying to get answered. So thank you all for coming, and we really appreciate it.
Hello, yeah. Can I have a minute, please? Hello. On behalf of all the artisan groups which have come here, I would like to thank the team of Nest for the excellent arrangement they have made and the connections they have, opportunity they have given us to connect with people, put our stories forward. Thank you very much.